Just to kick off, can you pinpoint a time when you first discovered the blues?
Oh, yeah. That was back in about 78 or so. I was in Adelaide, and it might have been 77, 76, somewhere around there anyway. I was playing in a kind of a local band, and we were sort of writing stuff, but I was into more 50s rock and roll. I'd been into Chuck Berry and the Beatles and Creedence and all that sort of stuff at that stage. And a friend of mine said to me, let's go out and see Smokestack Lightning. They were an Adelaide band back in the 70s. And they were playing the Old Gate Punt Hotel up in the hills.
Oh, yeah.
And I went and saw them, and I'd never really heard the blues. I thought it was sort of old man's music, you know, as you do when you're a kid and a bit of an idiot, you know. And then it changed my life. And the next day I went out, and he took me out to a record store down in Christie's Beach, and I bought John Mayall's Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton and stuff like that. And I just filled my head with it. And then I met some more people that were into that sort of stuff, and they lent me some records I've still got.
So before you knew it, you were hooked?
Yeah, I'd never forget that night. Never. It was great. The band was on fire that night, and the whole place, it was like a hippie sort of place up in the hills. And it was wonderful.
Now, you were born in Wales, but how old were you when you first came out here to Australia?
We moved to Australia when I was about 4 years old.
Oh, okay.
We moved to Adelaide. We were one of the migrants, staying in a hostel in Glenelg in what felt like 500-degree heat in a huge tin shed with a bunch of other English people, you know. That was in '65, I think.
How do you look back on those early days playing in Adelaide in terms of your grounding as a musician? I believe you did some pretty rough and ready gigs in those days.
Oh, yeah. Still do. It was interesting. It was different, you know. I did I did a lot of bike shows and, you know, pubs. I just remember also, though, I used to go to the Creole Room occasionally and see some jazz stuff, and that was really interesting. And I think the good thing about Adelaide is, I don't know if it's still the case now, but in those days everybody used to think you had to be a certain level because all the bands from Sydney and Melbourne were so much better, and they'd come to town and you go, well, actually, you know, some of the boys in Adelaide are better than these guys. and I think it made you work harder, and you thought you had a certain level you had to be at, and then you suddenly realise that it's great to, you know, want to get good and and become better, but at the same time, not necessarily everybody that comes from somewhere else is going to be better than you. So, I think that's a good thing about Adelaide, because it kind of kept you on your toes in those days anyway. As I said, I really don't know the scene anymore there, but I love coming home to visit.
Looking back, though, do you think it was an important period, though, for you to do those hard yards as you did there?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here in England, when you just do, just say you go down local pub or whatever and play, you know, you play from 9 to 11. You have one break in the middle, and they don't really care what you play as long as, you know, it's half decent.
Yeah.
Back in those days, you know, it was like a 4-hour gig. And when you're young, you just need to play and play and play and play until you get better. Here you get warmed up and, you know, okay, thank you, good night. Night's over. No wonder the Aussie bands kick 'em to pieces over here, I tell you.
Now, after Adelaide, you went up to Sydney for a while. You got to play with some notable names up there. Any standout memories of that period?
Yeah, I moved there in '83, and I was just sort of finding my feet, really. I joined a band. It was an Adelaide band, actually. They'd come back to Adelaide for Christmas, and they were looking for a guitar player, so I joined those guys for a while. But it wasn't really the sort of direction I wanted to go, because I was always very blues orientated, and it's quite funny because I could never quite find the right guys to play with, because I like the rock and roll side of things as well, and I found out that I was too bluesy for the rock and roll guys and I was too rocky for the blues guys. So
caught in the middle.
Same sort of thing over in Sydney. I never really met. The blues guys didn't want to rock hard enough, and the rock guys, most of them didn't have a lot of soul going on in the music. So the years I was in Sydney, it was always a little bit strange like that. I played with Swanee over there for a while, and then I joined Stevie Wright's band. I did one night with Jeff St. John as a stand-in.
Mm-hmm.
But I was there for most of the 80s. I stayed there for 7 years.
Anything in particular you learnt from the band leaders that you've played under that you apply to your role now as a band leader yourself?
Yeah, sort of keep out of their way when they're doing their thing. And give them lots of support and just be there, If they say, right, guitar solo, bang, you're there out the front. I was pretty shy and timid in those days.
Yeah.
The first gig I did with Swanee, I went into my solo and he grabbed me and he pushed me in the front of the stage and he said, in front of a couple of thousand people, and he said, that's where you stand when you do a guitar solo. And I thought, okay, well, not going to make that mistake again. That was all a learning curve.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was great. I wouldn't have it any other way. If I grew up over here, it wouldn't have done much for me, I don't think. But in those days, the music's the rock and roll's taken a different course in Britain over the past 20 years, that's for sure. It's all rubbish here now. A lot of my heroes, all the Zeppelins and Bad Companies and whatnot, they don't really exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Although I do live around the corner from Robert Plant, but there you go.
Now, you got your first record out in '93. After serving that long apprenticeship on the road, it must have been a great feeling to finally have some product of your own out there.
Yeah. It was about time. I'd moved. Before that, I'd moved back to Adelaide for a year, and then I went over to Melbourne, and I spent 5 years there. And then, actually, when I moved back to Adelaide, that was kind of fun because guys like Mick Fleetwood or Cheap Trick had come to town, and they'd come out and see us play because we were doing the graveyard shift at the Co Club or the Century, and back on Hindley Street, and that was really cool. Mick got up and played with us. And then I actually went to see him a couple of weeks ago. I did a show with him in Yorkshire. We sort of hung out a little bit, which was, he's got a fantastic band now. But anyway, so I did move over to Melbourne after a year of being back in Adelaide, and that was in '91. And I just decided it was time to do an album. I'd had all these songs lying around for a few years, and grabbed a few guys and went in the studio in Albert Park,
mm-hmm.
and did Feel the Heat, which, it's okay. Debut album and all that.
Yeah. What initially inspired the move to the UK? Was it meant to be permanent from the start?
Well, I don't know, really. I kind of tend to think that being a musician, you have to be prepared to sort of go anywhere that the climate dictates. You can either change with what's going on around you, or you can have a certain course in life that you feel you're sort of bound to take. And when something dies somewhere, you got to move on to somewhere else.
Yeah.
and take the music. And I had I'd recorded an acoustic album by then called Beck, Borrow and Steal in the same studio. This was in '96, and I had distribution through Shock Records, and the guys called me up and said, "Look, your CDs are selling better in Europe than around Australia, and you're flogging it all around the country. Maybe you should go over there." And I thought, oh dear, it's a long way. I've never been there before. So I was hanging out with some guys. I mean, I've been recording with Jim Keys at that stage. I played on his Pressure Makes Diamonds album.
That's right, yeah.
And was playing a little bit with Mick Peeling. We were doing a few sort of acoustic shows around Melbourne, and I was doing those with Mick, Jim as well. And of course, I'm just trying to remember because this was back in '96.
Yeah.
And I remember going and having lunch with Pete Wells, and Pete basically talked me into coming over here. He said, that they really look after you in Europe, And he was telling me the stories when he was around, when Rose Tattoo came over here and toured. And how they have all the back line for you and stuff. And I thought, wow, you don't have to drag your own stuff around in an old van. So, yeah, Pete was one of the guys that made me sort of see the light and get out for a while.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of been taking off bit by bit. You've got to work your ass off over here.
Just the same, there must have been a decision you agonised over at some point, considering you worked so hard to build a following here.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't really going anywhere because the blues thing, the blues market in Australia is, I think it's the roots and blues thing's taking off quite a bit now. But in those days, it was, especially in Melbourne, it was all these horrible cover bands and sort of this rock stuff that I didn't really want to play. And to do what I really wanted to play, it's got to be Europe or America. But I didn't have a green card, so I came over here.
Yeah. So you did find it initially a welcoming musical community when you got there?
Yeah, well, I spent 5 weeks travelling across America. It's quite funny, actually. I stuck all my stuff on a boat, so a bunch of guitars and amps and just a few personal belongings, and chucked them on a boat. It was going to take 3 months to get over to England, so I thought, well, I'll let that happen. It was just a big gamble. It's just jump off the edge and see if you float, basically, by coming over here. And a friend of mine was from England. They said, come and stay with us for a while, you can check it out. And I went, okay, might as well. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go over, I've heard so many stories about people coming over. Excuse me, I got a bit of a cold. And checking it out and going, yes, I'd like to do something here, and then they've got to go back home and pack up all their stuff, and they never come back again because it's such a long haul.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd do it all in one go and just take the gamble. And, it's paying off. It's
paying off, yeah.
Yeah, it's... But what I did, I went via America, so all my stuff went on a boat, and I took 2 guitars over to America, and I had a 5-week plan. Land in LA, leave from New York 5 weeks later, and anything I do in between was just whatever I felt like at the time and whatever took me,
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to jam nights and I was getting introduced to this person and that person, and I went up to San Francisco and did a Monday night jam. I remember this. It was run by this English guy. And this Chinese guy was following me around all night, and I was thinking, who's this guy? I didn't know a soul in that place. Anyway, he comes up to me at the end of the night, and he introduces himself. I thought he was a bit of a weirdo, but he wasn't. And he's a guitar player for Etta James.
Oh, God.
And he said to me, I think my record company would really like what you do. Here's their card. And I went, oh, great, thanks. And they're in New York. So I rang them up the next day and they said, shoot us over some CDs. So I sent them one of each of my albums, Feel the Heat and Big Brian Steel. And they said, where are you going next? And I said, well, I'm going to go down to Austin, Texas, because the night Mick Fleetwood played with me at the Century in Adelaide back in '90, Billy Thorpe was with him. Oh, yeah. And Thorpe actually came up to me and said, do you mind if Mick gets up and plays? And you know, is a bear Catholic, you know. So, and then Thorpe sort of grabbed me at the end of the night and we stayed in contact. And he said, you ought to get over to Austin, Texas and check out some bands. He said, no, don't worry about playing, just go over and have a look. Because I'd never been to America either. So I sort of took those words on board and I said to the record company, well, I'm going down to Austin. And they said, okay, how long are you going to be there for? I said, about a week. And they said, okay, give us a call from Austin. We'll have a listen to the stuff and we'll take it from there. I said, okay. So I got down to Austin, rang the record company in New York, and they loved the stuff. And they said, do you want to come to New York and do a gig? And I said, okay, well, I've got to fly out from New York. So I did that the day before. And they had distribution through Warner Brothers around the world, basically. And there was sort of a little bit of a talk about using those two albums, taking a few tracks off each one, doing a bit of a compilation and using it to try and break me into the US market. So I went, okay. So I hadn't heard back from them for a couple of months. So when I finally got over to England, I called them one day and I spoke to the secretary and I said, I've got an idea for a title for this album. And she said, what album's that? And I told her. She said, I think it's already gone to press. And I said, well, how can you do that? You haven't got a contract. And they said, no, it's gone to press. And so they printed up this album. And I didn't make any money out of it. It was sold through Warner Brothers around the world, and I made no money. But I think they were just a bit naughty. Anyway, that was my first lesson.
Yeah, nice introduction, yeah. France is quite a good market for you, I believe.
Sorry?
France is quite a good market for you, I believe.
France?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what had happened there to get... I do a fair bit of stuff over there. I'd been to a jam night in London, and I met these people, these French people, this guy and this girl, and the guy was a guitar player. And I'd never met a French person before, so I thought, I'll talk to these guys. So I told them, they asked me what I did, and I said, I play guitar, blah, 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 I write songs, got a couple of records. And so they were really, really interested in what I was doing, and this guy actually then formed a record company just so that he could put my records out because he really liked them, which is really funny. Yeah. And then they went over to the Medem thing in France. This was back in the late 90s, 97 or something. And they got a deal with Virgin for marketing and distribution for a record label that they were now putting together. So that was really, really strange. My first gig in France was going on after Mick Taylor from the Stones and just before Buddy Guy.
Wow, sandwiched in between, festival. Wow.
And I remember that night Mick was really not too happy because he thought he was opening for Buddy, but I'd actually sold more albums in France than Mick had that year, so I got better billing.
They seem to love their
Mick and I have
blues.
done quite a few shows together around Germany, actually. Since
really?
Then. Yeah.
They seem to love their blues in France. What do you think it is about the blues that strikes such a chord with them?
I think it's just that the whole culture is very musical and very artistic anyway.
Yeah.
The jazz scene there is huge, a lot of American jazz guys go to live in Paris or south of France or whatever. They just like music. The blues just falls into the music category.
It sure does. You've done a bit of work in guitar seminars over the years, conducting guitar classes. Do they sometimes become a learning experience for yourself?
Yeah, because you have to really analyse what you're doing, and you're trying to tell a bunch of people. It's really funny because I can't read the note of music, and I hate the idea of guitar schools, and sometimes they ask me to go and teach them one. Just do a blues sort of masterclass, which is interesting. I did it in the London, what was it, the Guitar Institute, GIT in London, and Guitar X. And you sort of have to pull apart what you're doing to teach a bunch of guys that are being taught the right way to play. You know, I say that in parentheses, the right way. But they've never gone out and done a gig. So, you know, all the stuff that they're learning, some of it might just turn to absolute garbage on the road.
Yeah.
Because you got to, you know, you got your obstacles and things you got to look out for when you're actually touring. So I've always thought that the best school is the road anyway.
Yeah.
You just got to go out there and do it. And I hated school. I don't know why anybody would want to go to school to learn how to rebel and play guitar.
Seems a mismatch, doesn't it?
The wrong way round, you know.
You've shown a preference for the classic three-piece band lineup over the years. Is that a structure that just seems right for you?
Well, it was. I just soon discovered that every guitar player on the planet has got a three-piece band because it's cheap to tour with, and you don't have to instruct so many people on stage how to play, and economical, not so many hotel rooms and food and whatever. But I was just finding that it was just getting a little bit samey, and I started playing in a two-piece, just guitar and drums, mainly because I had a Swiss-German bass player, and he'd literally gone mental the day before a big show I had in France at the Fehmarn Jimi Hendrix Festival, because the Isle of Fehmarn is where Jimmy played his last gig before he died. I think Billy Cox went mad over there too. I can't remember the story. Anyway, so I'm playing this festival in front of 14,000 people, and without a bass player. From the day before, my bass player, I was sharing a house with him, and he said, I think everybody is out to kill me, I need to go. And he went.
Good God.
He was a bit of a strange guy. Anyway, so I remember sitting out in the caravan out the back of the festival before we were about to go on, sitting with my drummer, and we're going, what are we going to play? There's only two of us. But there's a video of it on my MySpace page, actually. It's the last one down on the thing. A bit of advertising on my MySpace page. MySpace.com/Gwyn Ashton Music. And there was a guy there, Thomas Roof, who's got a record label, Roof Records, in Germany.
Yeah.
And he said to me afterwards, I could have sold 150 of your CDs here tonight if you'd had enough. By this stage, my record company, newly formed record company, wasn't really living up to what they were supposed to do, like supply me with a lot of stuff. So he said, I could have sold 150 albums for you. We need to talk sometime. And he was record label for Walter Trout, and lots of people, Jeff Healey, just before he died. And so we were talking over the years, and in fact, last week he offered me a 3-album deal. So
fantastic!
I might be signing with him. I'm having a look into things at the moment. But he loves my duo format. And so the whole point of this particular part of the conversation was I've gone from the 3-piece to a 2-piece.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit different. And a couple of editors of guitar magazines over here, I've just recorded my new album, actually. We'll have to talk about that later.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's as a 2-piece. And I started using a thumb pick and an octave pedal and trying to simulate a bass player with my thumb and just do something a little bit different. Still playing the blues and rocking it up a bit, and got a young drummer and, you know, try and appeal to a bit of a different crowd than what I've been getting. Try and get a younger crowd in.
Yeah.
You've got to keep it all fresh, don't you?
Absolutely. So who's your drummer? What's his background?
Well, he's an 18-year-old lad here in England. His name's Dave Small. He's also a singer, good singer. He was playing with Robert Plant's son, who's a drummer in a local band, and they sort of split up, and he's a good little drummer, you know. And I was running a jam night here actually on a Wednesday night, and Robert was coming along to it. And it's funny, Robert Plant's been to see me 5 times, but I've never seen him live. So I think it's kind of cool. And it was actually I was running a jam night in a pub that the Led Zeppelin album In Through the Outdoor, all the artwork on the cover was done in that pub.
Okay.
So it's Robert's local, you know.
Okay, yeah.
And Robert's been out to see us a few times, and he had some really, really good things to say about us. And I don't want to use his name. Everybody tries to use him, so I don't want to give out all the quotes that he's laid on me. But they're just very encouraging words, and I know that I'm doing the right thing, basically.
Oh, that's great.
Even though my agent in Germany has said, "Oh, you cannot be a band if you only have 2 people. It must be 3-piece," you know. I'm going, this is my band.
Yeah. You found a niche.
So there you go.
Yeah. So how would you sum up the state of the blues scene in the UK at the moment?
Well, there's better players in Australia. How can I say this? They're kind of very proud of it, but it's not very good.
Okay.
And there's a couple of young guys. I mean, there's a couple of Aussies over here as well. Darren Noendorf's over here, and Jeff Lane comes over now and then, and you know, various guys that can actually get all the way over here because it is such a long way to go. And it's there's some young guys, but they're kind of very derivative of Stevie Ray or whatever, you know. I'm sure in America they wouldn't really get much of a look in because, you know, you got to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pubs you can play at here that you don't really want to do that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people just rehashing what's already been done and done better.
Yeah, I think most of the guys here think Gary Moore's the blues, and
yeah,
and you've got to sound like that, you know, and it's like far from it.
Yeah. Is America an area of interest for you?
Oh yeah, it's fantastic over there. But saying that, you know, guys are over there starving because they can't get enough work, and they're great players.
Yeah.
So all the Americans want to go to Europe, play over there. You know, I met some wonderful people in the States. You know, great players, and went to see Buddy Whittington the other night from John Mayall's band.
Yeah.
Mayall's just sacked his band, so Buddy's put this thing together. He's got an album out. It's great. When I went to Texas and I did a show with Malford Milligan. We played, sang with Storyville with Stevie Ray Vaughan's old band.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Double Trouble guys, David Grissom and David Holt, Chris Layton, Tommy Shannon. And, you know, Malford saying, hey, man, you know, I want to come over and play in Europe with you. You know, it's a funny scene over there. Is it pay-to-play sort of thing? They're playing for tips or whatever. But it's a real nice sort of almost a family scene in Austin. You know, if you get in with the right guys, the real top shot players, they're all friends. You know.
So there's a real sense of community amongst them.
Yeah. It's a bit like Australia in that way, but it's not like that in England. It's that they don't really bond that well, the musicians over here. So you find yourself sort of competing against the musicians instead of. I don't know. It's a real strange scene.
Yeah.
So I mean, but what I was saying before, Dave and I put this duo together, and we've just recorded. I bought a bunch of recording gear, and I've got a MacBook Pro, Apple computer, and we just recorded an album on it.
Fantastic. Well, before I let you go, tell us all about it.
Yeah, well, it's going to come out in March over here anyway, so it'll probably be available in Australia via import or off my website or whatever.
Yep.
I called up a friend of mine who is a mastering engineer. His name's David Mitson. He was in charge of the Sony Records mastering suite for 15 years, so he did the entire Sony blues catalogue, and he's done Billie Holiday and Willie Nelson, Barbra Streisand, and a bunch of movie soundtracks like The Mask and Blair Witch Project and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I told him I was doing this thing, and I said, I bought some microphones, and I've got no idea what to do with them. I've got Logic on my laptop, and I don't even know how to arm a track and start recording. So he said, oh, that sounds interesting, I'll come down. So he's got involved in this. We've learned how to use Logic together, because he's a Pro Tools guy. I'm getting into the scientific part of music now. And I'm still mixing it. He's done one lot of mastering for it at the moment, and I've got a few copies out to a few places just to get reviews and whatnot. And I'm actually remixing it now before it gets released for the first time. So I'm still learning how to mix the thing, but it sounds really big and raw and loud and nasty. Guitar, drums, power duo sort of thing.
Fantastic. Well, yours is a type of music that thrives in a live situation. How do you try and recapture that live feel? When
we did it live. We just went nuts.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a headphone splitter. This is how primitive it was. It was done in a workshop. We slapped up a few bits of carpet, stuck the drum kit and the guitar amp in the same room, had two mics on the drums and a kick, so 3 mics. The guitar was spilling down the drum mics like mad. I had this desk baffling it off. And when I had to do a live vocal track, I had to go outside the room, shut the doors, look at the drummer through the window for the eye contact, and sing live vocals without headphones.
Wow.
And it was really funny because there was just enough spill coming out of that room because it wasn't a soundproof room at all. So I could hear what I was doing, and I could still hear myself sing at the same time. So what you see is what you get with this record, and it's the closest thing that I've ever recorded to a live gig. And it's sounding really big. So I did an album a couple of years ago up in Scotland with Ted McKenna and Chris Glenn from the Alex Harvey band.
Yep. And
Ted played with Rory Gallagher for a few years as well. And Ted was one of my favourite drummers, you know, in the world. Blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. And that album was a lot of fun to do, but this one's a little bit more where I am at, you know. Oh, I forgot to tell you, back in 1999, I ran into Jerry McAvoy and Brendan O'Neill, and they played with Rory Gallagher for many years. Jerry was Rory's bass player for 20 years. And they asked me to joined this band called Band of Friends, which was the whole Rory Gallagher's band with Lou Martin on keyboards and Mark Feltham on harmonica, doing a memorial to Rory around Europe. So we did that for about 5 years. And Jerry and Brendan and myself actually did an album called Fang It together.
That's right, yeah.
So that was great, and through that, because Lou, bless his soul, had a stroke and he can't play keyboards anymore. So that was pretty devastating for him as well as us, you know, definitely. So we needed another member of the band to go on the road with. So we had 2 drummers. We had Ted McKenna and Brendan O'Neill at the same time, and that was just magic, playing around Ireland and France, playing, because Rory was always a big influence and
absolutely
a hero of mine, you know, forever. In fact, I've still got the records the guy lent me back in 79 of Irish tour and live in Europe. And so to actually play with these guys, I just thought, okay, well, I've done the right thing coming over here, because I'm playing with my heroes now.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know.
Oh, great story.
It's justified the whole thing,
of course,
the whole process.
Absolutely.
And I love coming back to Australia, but it's very difficult there, I think, to play the blues, especially in Adelaide. There's no gigs left.
No, it is struggling. It is struggling over there. Yeah. So the new album in March. Any chance of looking at a possibility of a home visit to follow up the album?
Well, I need to get a distributor and an agent in Australia. Somebody who will take care of my entire back catalogue, and then I just don't want to slum it out in all the pubs, you know. I want to do sort of half-decent venues. I deserve it after all these years, I think.
I think so, absolutely.
I've been back home to visit family and friends and done a few sort of pubs around the place, and it sort of made me realise why I left. I mean, they're really nice people, you know, look after you and all that, but when you do it on that level, it's like, can you bring a PA system? And it's just like, well, no, actually, I'm visiting. Yeah.
No thoughts of putting
How many people are you going to bring with you? It's like, well, I haven't lived there for 12 years, so I'm not exactly sure.
No thoughts of putting yourself up for the festival circuit down here?
I'd love to.
That is a healthy area at the moment, the festival scene. There seems to be festivals everywhere.
Well, if there's anybody listening to this and they want to book me for some festivals, you know, you know how to contact me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm doing a one-man band thing as well when I come over. I toured with Johnny Winter around Europe, just opening for him solo. So I've developed this thing with a stomp box, you know, a bass drum beat thing and a loop pedal and an octave pedal, and just go out there and make a lot of noise.
Fantastic.
And so I've done that with Vanilla Fudge in Germany, and I've done it with Jeff Healy, Robin Trowler, Pat Travers, heaps of people over here. It's all on my website. Mm-hmm. Lots of pictures and stuff. So I've been hanging out with all the guys that I bought their records, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, and their careers are a little bit low compared to how they were back then. So now they're sort of back on the middle ground circuit, and so I get to do shows with them, which is kind of cool.
It's fantastic, yeah.
I mean, 20 years ago they were playing stadiums to 20,000 people. Now they're doing 500-600 seaters. Guys like the Yardbirds, I've done so many tours with them, and Dr. Feelgood and Peter Green, Mick Taylor, as I said before, Mark Ford from the Black Crows.
Yeah.
We played together in Germany, and it's funny, I was doing a festival over there last year with my drummer, and so it was a two-piece, and Mark just got on the bill because he was doing a European tour, and he was on at 4 o'clock and we were on at midnight. And I said to my drummer, we've got to get there in time because we were driving across Germany. You know, I said, we've got to get there for 4 o'clock to see Mark because he's great, you know. So we got there and I ended up checking his set out, and we were talking afterwards, you know, as you do with fellow musicians on the road. And we ended up chatting for like 8 hours about fuzz boxes and guitars and amps and all sorts of stuff. And we had dinner together, and he got up and played bass with us that night. And I hung out with him in Los Angeles in January. We went to the NAMM show together, and we're talking about doing some gigs in England together for a double guitar thing, which is cool.
Well, sounds like there's plenty keeping you busy over there, Gwyn, and sounds like no regrets at all about the move.
Well, no, not really. Another guy that lives around the corner, just last story, Robbie Blunt, who played with...
He played with Robert for a while too, didn't he? Yeah.
Robert Plant, yeah. Well, Robbie lives just around the corner. I just got a guitar refretted for him, actually. I had lunch with him yesterday. And we're talking about doing some songwriting together and doing an album. So it'll be like a 4-piece, or maybe 5 with some keys as well. So, yeah, he's been to one of my jam nights and had a bit of a play together, and it's so easy to play with another guy when they play like he does.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to be doing that next year.
Excellent. Gwyn, great to catch up with you. Been a real treat.
Yeah, fantastic. And, thanks for calling.
We hope you do find that local distributor down here and an agent, and we get you down here and back on our stages again sometime soon. We'd love to see you back home playing for us.
Oh, I'd love to come back. I mean, I really miss it over there. You know, family, friends, you know, the beach, food. There's not that many Thai restaurants over here.
Oh, they're everywhere here. It's.
I know. Well, I've developed a taste for a curry, so there's plenty of Indian restaurants.
Thai is the new Chinese down here at the moment. They're everywhere, which is great. Love it.
Well, the food's better back in Australia, so. Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for having me.
No worries. Best of luck with the new record, and maybe we'll catch up again in the new year to have a decent chat about it when it's out and about.
Yeah, that'd be great. And the website's gwynashton.com.
All right.
Real easy. And the MySpace page, you know, got the video and stuff up there. Been playing with Don Airey as well from Deep Purple. So. There's a video, and all sorts of stuff. Just check it all out.
Fantastic. No, I'll make sure we slip that in there a few times.
That's wonderful.
Good on you. Thanks, Gwyn.
All right, thanks, mate.
All the best. Cheers.
Bye. See ya.